blueberry waffles. Well, James is having blueberry banana waffles. We used a full package of, I don't know how many grams there are. Oh, 510 grams of blueberries.
So it's a Washington product.
Yeah. And
so hello to everyone out there from Washington, all one of you. Or that's probably optimistic, just to hope that we've got one person watching from Washington.
But my waffles, you notice that.
Well, here comes an apple.
Yeah, I have to be picking.
I almost got stoned by an apple.
They're falling now.
It's not my nature to get stoned, but it almost happened there.
Yeah, the waffles today, I didn't have enough of the steel cut oats to blend up in the food processor to make flour. So I added 2 packages of the instant maple and brown sugar. The one single serving size, whatever. And of course they didn't. The waffles stuck to the iron, and so you'll notice James as they're folded up. I tried to make them look nice still, and mine it's actually apart, but it looks solid. But normally we don't eat that sort of stuff, but we got it given to us from the Salvation Army. I don't have to take that stuff, and I shouldn't, but I'm actually glad I did today, or I wouldn't have had enough mix to make waffles.
So I don't have my glasses with me. Where in Washington is that?
Selah?
Selah, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Named after a place in former Holy Land. I don't think it's that holy anymore, but I see that.
Honestly,
in the wilderness of south of Judah. Well, anyway, what were you saying?
It doesn't even taste that sweet.
The waffle.
Yeah, but.
Well, that doesn't matter.
Sweet enough
it's
to
just
stick to the
set
yarn.
up. Yeah, but it's a setup for the real sweet stuff.
Exactly. I mean, all I care about are the blueberries. Yeah. That's the
healthy stuff.
Well,
certified organic, USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture. Certifié biologique. Is that what the French call it? Something like that. Yep. And seeing that you're about 50% French, it's what we call it too, right? You're learning to read French. I'm learning to read it too. It's just a couple of decades down the road.
So what were we talking about today, James?
Well, I'll just finish up this review.
Okay.
Agatha Christie.
Okay.
In Dutch and in English. Together. What is this? Rutledge thing? William Morrow. Imprint of HarperCollins Publishing. So, I think they basically put out all her stuff, except for the, what was it, Mary Westmacott or something like that, things. I think she published 6 things under a pseudonym, so she wouldn't be stereotyped when it came to that sort of stuff. But it looks as though under her real name, not her maiden name, I think that was her married name, she published something like 84 volumes, including 2 of autobiography. Christie, I think that would have been the name of her first husband. Her second husband is a whole lot more impressive individual. Max Mallowan. I've run across this after I grew up and after I basically finished reading her novels for a long time. I ended up reading some of his stuff because some of the stuff I specialize in. I specialize in a lot of different things, so it's hard to say I specialize in something. well, quite a few things. I'm not going to say many things. But Max Mallowan, he did some research, archaeological work, and he would have known a fair amount about at least some languages, ancient languages and stuff like that, maybe a whole lot. So he was an impressive individual. I'd say more impressive really than her. She was impressive in terms of her success. Here's what they say: is the most widely published author of all time, outsold only by the Bible and Shakespeare. Well, that makes her the second most published, because Shakespeare was an author of sorts. So I don't know what they mean. It seems a little bit oxymoronic there. Contradiction in terms. Sold more than 1 billion copies in English and another 1,100,000,000 foreign languages. And here's one of the foreign languages she's been published in. Looks as though when this thing was put out about 20 years ago. Yeah, exactly 20 years ago. In Dutch they published, this publisher put out 75 of her works. So there you go. So it's the Uitgeverij Leuting Seithof, something like that. Pronunciation's awful, for which I apologize, but you can't blame me for trying. Maybe you can, but I'm trying. And so what do they say about Agatha Christie? Is often the queen of crime, misdeeds. I like the way they misdeed is crime, right? In Dutch. Called. So the queen of crime is that what she's called over here? Yeah, the queen of mystery actually is over here, but the queen of crime in Dutch. They say she sold her. They say her books have sold more than 500 million exemplars. So that would be copies. So have been sold. So there's a little bit of a disagreement with the stats and stuff like that. It says 500 million according to them, and they say almost as famous as herself are her creations, shapings. It's kind of like the way the Dutch have it. The Belgian detective Hercule Poirot and the clever old Miss Marple and the detective pair Tommy and Tuppence. So I was reading the Dutch, as you can see here. I'm pretty slow with it, but I get the job done. Or maybe I was blowing it, I don't know. But I don't think so. Anyway, so I'm going to review now. I reviewed yesterday, kind of like the process that I use to teach myself languages. If I can manufacture, as it were, a bilingual, in other words, get a copy of an original English thing put into another language, or another language put into English thing, or in the case of the Bible, translations of, let's say, something into English, let's say the New Testament into English, and then the New Testament, let's say, into Creole or something like that, a West African Creole language, or yeah. So that's what I've been doing. It's not trying to do, that's what I've been doing. I don't know how successful. Well, I'll say I'm reasonably happy with the results. What it does is it helps me avoid having to use a dictionary, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The key thing is grammar, like I have kind of, with Dutch, hardly at all looked at grammar. I've more looked into grammar just to see how it's pronounced and stuff like that. I've looked a little bit more into Norwegian grammar. I've done this with the Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. And did that help really much, looking at the grammar? Not that much. I mean, basically, when you're looking at the Germanic languages, the continental ones, the setup, it really isn't that much different from German. So I've studied enough German that I can figure out what the hell's happening, so on and so forth, in Dutch or in the Scandinavian languages, with the exception of Icelandic. That one's going to be exciting because there's a whole lot more of what we consider grammar um, in that, where you've got to know word endings and so on and so forth. The order is kind of not so much of a key to how words in the language or in sentences and so on and so forth, phrases relate to each other. So I'm going to review the English first. Maybe not one of her better ones. This is a Tommy and Tuppence mystery. I think she wrote 6 of them. This, I think, would have been the second last of the Tommy and Tuppence things that she wrote. She died 1976, I believe they were saying somewhere in this book or in the other one or in both, and born about 1890. So she lived a long and what many would consider a fruitful life. I consider as a pretty good life. You know, like I don't think there's much significance to her writings, but really I don't think when it comes to fiction there's not much significance to any of it. You know, and that includes James Joyce and Marcel Proust, so on and so forth. People who think that, let's say, Charles Dickens' works, his oeuvre, shall we say, is the height of achievement. Well, they've got another thing coming. There's things that are way more important. I mean, what was it that Marion Moore wrote about poetry? The things that are more important beyond all this fiddle. So there are things that are important beyond all this fiddle. I might have got the wording wrong, but the import, yeah, there are things that are important beyond all this fiddle. That's poetry. That's the stuff that I write. Pauline's writing it and stuff like that. If there's stuff that's important in writing, it's stuff that is imported into it. If there are things that are important in writing or fiction or poetry or drama, it's imported into it. So James Joyce Ulysses is relatively important, but that's because the guy, apparently, when he was a fairly young pup, when he was still living in Ireland,
it's a little bit chilly this morning.
It's a little bit chilly. As an adult, he basically lived a life of self-imposed exile in Italy and France and Switzerland. There might have been a few other places, but in transit and so on and so forth. I think those are the 3 main ones. When he was a young pup in Ireland, apparently, you know, he'd kind of let himself go a little bit. But when it came time for the national, not elections, but national assessments of students, he'd be like, I think it was number 1, but it might have been like top 2 or something like that in all of Ireland. Ireland didn't have a big population back then. Doesn't have that big of a population right now. Although, who was it? William Butler Yeats wrote, "Great hatred, little room, maimed us from the start." Yeah, check it out. Ireland, after the Irish potato famine, that's been well over 150 years, I think nowadays, is the least intensely populated country in all of Western Europe. Great hatred, little room, maimed us from the start. So that applies, frankly, to all the countries of Western Europe. I'm going to go a little off topic. Europe should, and that includes Ireland, should not be required to take immigrants. They should not be required to take refugees. You've got Turkey, which has way more room, or had, up until recently, per capita to take people in, especially Muslims. Should, because it's a Muslim country, you'd think that there'd be less, let's say, antipathy between people. Should be taking in everyone coming in, particularly when you look at their role in supporting ISIS. They were running ISIS as though it were the Turkish Foreign Legion in Syria and Iraq, responsible for all sorts of crimes against humanity and war crimes, and they were running them. Much the same way that Pakistan is running the Taliban. So, Turkey's heavily responsible for much of the garbage that was happening in Syria and Iraq over the last roughly 10 years. And they should be taking every refugee, every one of them, instead of importing them into Europe, letting them go basically almost the full length of Turkey, and having them swim or whatever, go in leaky boats across the Aegean into Greece. One of the things that's been in the news recently is the Turks are getting sick of having refugees park themselves in Turkey. That's their fellow Muslims to a large extent. There'd be some Yazidis, there'd be some Christians and stuff like that, because of course ISIS was selectively, but that's the responsibility of Turkey, that were running ISIS as a kind of unofficial Turkish Foreign Legion in Syria and Iraq, and letting them do God knows only what. So the Turkish people have been, I think, doing demonstrations. I hope that's all it's been. Although they shouldn't be doing any of it. But I gather there have been incidents against foreigners coming from Syria and Iraq, and maybe to a certain extent elsewhere. Now, why would that be? You see, of course, they wouldn't like the Yazidis and Christians, but, there's been a long-term antipathy. It would go back roughly 1,000 years, we'll say 900, between Turks and Arabs. And especially in the area along the southeastern border of, it's more the southeastern would be Kurdish, but southern border between Turkey and Syria. So in the long run, I researched that area in ancient history, well into southern Turkey. You have Semitic peoples in there. Samal, I suspect, was a Semitic entity, and that's well into Turkey. No, Semitic people isn't the same as Arabic. Like the Arabs, getting this straight, I'm not talking about Arabic speakers. I'm talking about Arabs with no business being in Syria. The natives of Syria would have spoken Aramaic, a Semitic language like Arabic, but not Arabic. They're not native to Lebanon. Get that straight. What in ancient times, what would have been spoken there is a Semitic language related to Arabic, but basically something that would have come down from Phoenician. Okay? Arabs are not native to Iraq. Got that straight? The natives still kind of exist even after attacks by ISIS. Ethnic cleansing and probably something that would be bordering on genocide. I don't use that word lightly, unlike so many faux gauches today. Are Assyrians. What Assyrians? Oh yeah, what religion do they practice? Well, the few that survived, some of them might have converted over. Christianity. Same sort of thing. Aramaic, Syriac. I don't know if anyone speaks Syriac anymore, uses it in religious documents, but I've been studying Syriac, and it's Christian, okay? So the natives in Syria, the natives in Lebanon are Christians.
Or were, until they possibly converted, like many of them would have converted.
Exactly right, but what would have happened is there would have been, you see, like I'm part indigenous, and it looks like maybe on 3 different parts of my mother's genealogy, My rights here on Turtle Island, or whatever one anyone wants to call North America, are like this, or maybe like this by comparison with someone who's more purely
yeah, of course.
indigenous.
Yeah,
So that's my point. It's important you point that out.
yeah.
Now, the conversion, of course, was by, we won't call it force in the case of Christians, we'll call it coercion. So it was selective taxation. And it was set out by the powers that be in Islam to make it a means of coercion. You know, like it would be selective head tax on any male who achieved the age of majority. And it wasn't like 18. It was like when I gather something like the secondary sex characters that started setting. So roughly when the teens, with 13, the onset maybe? Of the teen.
I don't know.
Something like that. And then when if someone was a landowner, a selective tax on land, and if someone were a businessman, a selective tax on goods sold. Nice. And so the intent was, the expressed intent was to force, coerce. We won't use force because I'm not suggesting that it was like a convert or die. It was convert or pay onerous taxes. Onerous, that means heavy.
Yeah, but for many it's convert or die.
If you're not a person of the book, if you're not a Jew, a Christian, or a Zoroastrian, eventually got that kind of exception to the rule was spread to Hindus. I'm not so much sure about Buddhism.
Polytheism or something. Then
you're SOL.
It's convert or die.
Spit out of luck.
So if you look at it with any degree of honesty.
Now that's tough to find nowadays amongst any number of people.
A lot of like the native religions here would be considered
polytheistic.
And so allowing people to immigrate, which believe that people who are polytheistic should convert or die, is really offensive to, like, it's more than offensive to native people.
It's dangerous.
Because, I mean, once people of that religion decide, once they've their population is increased to a point where they can vote in Sharia law and do whatever they want, then the native people are SOL.
Spit out of luck.
Any government who is bringing in people who want to kill the native people, who literally would like to kill them if they won't convert. Right now, that's unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. You know, if other people think that's okay, well, they're racist against native people. Honestly, they're freaking racist.
Faux gauches?
Yeah.
It's fake left-wingers. So we're still working on this stuff. Have we still got some time?
Oh, sure. You got 4 minutes or something.
4 or 5. So what I'll say is I've done a lot of translations. Or translating. Or really, reading, going from one book to another. I'm always shocked, not always, but often shocked about how much gets left out in translations. So the classic translation to English of The Magic Mountain leaves, what? This is Thomas Mann. And they leave substantial, well, I'm not talking about whole paragraphs, but sentences out. What is that about? Now it happens a little bit here, but it's more like to smooth things out, but there's a little bit too much of it for my taste. So I don't know if you have a choice. These guys might have a monopoly in Dutch or in Holland or whatever on putting Agatha Christie things out. But just buyer beware, caveat emptor. I was going to do something like, what would it be? Caveat vendor. like which is beware seller, like don't sell us garbage. But unfortunately, there's no, like there's no way of actually carrying out that threat. You'd better sell us proper stuff, or else you're going to jail. It'd be a different sort of caveat, caveat vendor. But caveat vendor here, like you guys, if you come up with a second edition of this, well, I think they have, but a third edition, like get a slightly better translation. Okay, get the whole thing in there. There's, it'd be involved putting like 10 more pages or stuff like that, the stuff that you've left out, and that'd be maybe advice. Anyway, are they recommended? Don't buy any of these new. You get them secondhand, like I did. Go for it. Have some fun with Agatha Christie.